Ah, yes. As most of you know, we enjoy our fair share of horror on this channel. But no one knows such terror as the man whose work we shall be looking at today, a Mr. Edgar Allen Poe. This is the classic stories of Edgar Allan Poe and his collection of work. So let us start from the beginning with Metzengerstein. I don't know what that means, but it sounds interesting. Horror and fatality have been stalking abroad in all ages. Why then give a date to this story I have to tell? Let it suffice to say that at the period of which I speak, there existed in the interior of Hungary, the country, not the state of being, a settled, although hidden belief in the doctrines of metempsychosis, of the doctrines themselves, that is, of their falsity, or of their probability, I say nothing. I assert, however, that much of our incredulity, as La Bruyere says of all our unhappiness, vient de nos pauvres êtres seuls. I'm sure someone who speaks the language I just spoke will tell me I'm horribly wrong. But there are some periods in the Hungarian superstition which were fast verging to absurdity. They, the Hungarians, differed very essentially from their Eastern authorities. For example, the soul, said the former, I give the word of an acute and intelligent Parisian, ne dimio quion seu fois dans uns corps sensible, or reste un cheval, un chien, un baume, même n'est que la resemblance pure tangible de ses ennemis. The families of Berlifitzing and Metzengerstein had been at variance for centuries. Never before were two houses so illustrious, mutually embedded by hostility so deadly. The origin of their enmity seems to be found in the words of the ancient prophecy. A lofty name shall have a fearful fall, when as the rider of his horse the mortality of Metzengerstein shall triumph over the immortality of Berlifitzing. To be sure, the words themselves had little or no meaning, but more trivial causes have given rise, and that no long while ago, to consequences equally eventful, besides the estates which were contagious, I don't think I'm saying that right, had long exercised a rival influence in the affairs of a business government. Moreover, near neighbors are seldom friends, and the very windows of the palace pardon me, I skipped over a line. And the inhabitants of the castle Berlifitzing might look from their lofty buttresses into the very windows of the palace Metzengerstein. Least of all had the more than feudal magnificence thus discovered a tendency to allay the irritable feeling of the less ancient and less wealthy Berlifitzings. What wonder, then, that the words, however silly of that prediction, should have succeeded in settling and keeping at variance two families already predisposed to quarrel by every instigation of hereditary jealousy. The prophecy seemed to imply, if that implied anything, a final triumph on the part of the already more powerful house, and was of course remembered with the more bitter animosity by the weaker and less influential. Wilhelm, Count Berlifitzing, although loftily descended, was at the epoch of this narrative an infirm and doting old man, remarkable for nothing but an inordinate and inveterate personal antipathy to the family of his rival, so passionate a love of horses and of hunting that neither bodily infirmity, great age, nor mental incapacity prevented his daily participation in the dangers of the chase. Frederick Baron Metzengerstein was, on the other hand, not yet of age. His father, the Minister G., died young. His mother, the Lady Mary, followed him quickly after Frederick was, at the time, in his 15th year. In a city, 15 years are no long period. A child may be still a child in his third lustrum, but in a wilderness, in so magnificent a wilderness as the old principality, 15 years have a far deeper meaning. For some peculiar circumstances attending the administration of his father, the young baron, at the decease of the former, entered immediately upon his vast possessions. Such estates were seldom held before by a nobleman of Hungary. His castles were without number. The chief in point of splendor and extent was the Château Metzengerstein. The boundary line of his dominions was never clearly defined, but his principal park embraced a circuit of 50 miles. Upon the succession of a proprietor so young, with a character so well known, to a fortune so unparalleled, little speculation was afloat in regard to his probable course of conduct, and indeed, for the space of 3 days, the behavior of the heir out-heroed, I don't think there's a word, Herod, I don't know, and fairly surpassed the expectation of his most enthusiastic admirers. Shameful debaucheries, flagrant treacheries, unheard of atrocities, gave him trembling vassals, quickly to understand that no servile submission on their part, no punctilious of conscience of his own, were thenceforward to prove any security against the remorseless fang of petty Caligula. On the night of the 4th day, the stables of the castle Berlifitzing were discovered to be on fire, and the unanimous opinion of the neighborhood added the crime of the incendiary to the already hideous list of the baron's misdemeanors and enormities. But during the tumult occasioned by this occurrence, the young nobleman himself sat apparently buried in meditation, in a vast and desolate upper apartment of the family palace Metzengerstein. The rich, although faded tapestry hangings, which swung gloomily upon the walls, represented the shadowy and majestic forms of 1,000 illustrious ancestors. Here, rich ermined priests and pontifical dignitaries, familiar, familiary, I can't speak today. Familiary, seated with the autocrat and the sovereign, but a veto on the wishes of a temporal king, or restrained with the fiat of papal supremacy, the rebellious sceptre of the arch-enemy. There, the dark tall statures of the Prince Metzengerstein, their muscular war courses plunging over the carcasses of fallen foes, startled the steadiest nerves with their vigorous expressions, and here again the voluptuous and swan-like figures of the dams of days gone by floated away in the mazes of an unreal dances to the strains of imaginary melody. But as the Baron listened and affected to listen to the gradual increasing uproar in the stables of Berlifitzing, or perhaps pondered upon some more novel, some more decided act of audacity, his eyes became unwittingly reverted to the figure of an enormous and unnatural colored horse, represented in the tapestry as belonging to a Saracen ancestor of the family of his rival. The horse itself, in the foreground of the design, stood motionless and statue-like, while farther back its discomfited rider perished by the dagger of a Metzengerstein. On Frederick's lips arose a fiendish expression as he became aware of the direction which his glance had without his conscience assumed. Yet he did not remove it. On the contrary, he could by no means account for the overwhelming anxiety which appeared falling like a pall upon his senses. It was with difficulty that he reconciled his dreamy and incoherent feelings with the certainty of being awake. The longer he gazed, the more absorbing became the spell, the more impossible did it appear that he could ever withdraw his glance from the fascination of that tapestry. Now, while we are almost near the end, I feel like that is a good place to stop, to kind of give into question what was actually happening within that part of the story. If any of you would like to give your opinions on what was happening in that story, then please do tell me below. And I will see all of you in the next reading.